Hello, everybody. John Pollock, Wei Ting, back with you for day 4 coverage of the G1 Climax. Not only are we going to be covering Friday's show from Oda Ward Gymnasium, but we are also going to be covering some of the news. We'll talk about AEW's viewership for their Grand Slam event on Wednesday, and we're also going to discuss the Dark Side of the Ring episode covering Chris Kanyon from Thursday night. Hello, Wei.
Hey, John. Not only do I want to welcome you, of course, to the show, but all the listeners listening right now, not just our Post Wrestling Cafe patrons, but because today's G1 was made available for free for everybody at New Japan World, we decided to make this post show free for everybody as well. So hello, if you're a free listener, we will be doing one of these post shows after every single G1 event, as we always do every single year at postwrestlingcafe.com, which is our Patreon. But something different this year is that we're going to throw in a bit of a news update along with all of these G1 shows. I mean, this is kind of forcing us to get into the habit of posting multiple shows sometimes per day, but at least almost like, what feels like a daily show. And especially tonight, having to cover Rampage and SmackDown on the same show, this kind of allows us to spread the wealth a little bit more.
And I'm going to announce off the top that we are going to talk about the Chris Kanyon episode and our thoughts about the episode. And then at the end of the show, we're going to air a interview that Mauro Ranallo conducted with Kanyon from May of 2008. It's a interview that I had, and we thought it would be very important to run this because the two of them discussed their own respective mental health struggles. This occurred 2 years before Kanyon tragically took his life in 2010. I think it's a very important interview to air, so that's going to come, and we're going to put it at the end of today's show.
I've had a chance to listen to it, and it was a really captivating interview, especially in light of, just watching this episode, especially being able to hear him and Mauro Ranallo kind of share their experiences with bipolar disorder. So stick around.
Okay, let's get into the G1 from Friday, our B Block event. And the B Block shows, I've got to say, Wei, it's like we have said, I don't know if you're necessarily going to get the same kind of blow-away matches, although we did get one with Tanahashi and Okada that may be on the high end of the spectrum of B-block matches. But I would say, match by match, I think we are going to find more of a consistency among the B-block matches.
That's certainly been the case with these first 2 episodes, or at least the first 2 episodes from each block. Absolutely. I think the story is that you're going to get more consistency throughout the shows, whereas with the A Block shows, at least for the first 2 offerings, the undercard has been pretty dire with really stellar main events. So, going into this, I think on paper, the B Block shows and the B Block roster does not look attractive at all, but, it really, I think, opened the door for a lot of these guys to pleasantly surprise me, which I think we'll talk about on this show.
So we're going to get right into things. As Wei mentioned, this was a free show on New Japan World, which I think is, they have done this many years throughout the G1, where they throw in a few free episodes in there for people to jump on at various points. I think it's very smart. And it also kind of informed the commentary, at least in the opening match, where they flat out had an explanation of the G1 and how it works, very much catering it to someone that might be sampling this for the first time.
Absolutely. This year especially, I think, New Japan needs these sort of jumping on points, reasons to give people the sample. I mean, I imagine I can already sense, we did sense early on that interest for this G1 going in was relatively low. And so I think these free offerings from time to time are very important for any sort of, paywalled business.
So we start off with Hiroshi Tanahashi and Hiroki Goto, both losing their first tournament matches. And Tanahashi, Kevin Kelly explains, has been doing a lot of upper body stretching in preparation for this match, dealing with his neck coming out of the Okada match. And the neck would be a big focus. Any upper body stretching for you today, Wei?
Not so much. No, I think maybe I stretched some hamstrings, but no, nothing upper body as yet.
They did this wild crisscross spot, and Tanahashi ducked Goto's lariat and took out his knee, but before Goto fell to the mat, he landed a Ushigoroshi. So you have Goto selling the knee, Tanahashi favoring the neck. The Shotenkai gets countered with a twist and shout, Sling Blade, aces high, but goes for the high fly flow, and Goto is out of the way, and Goto smashes him in the neck, reverse GTR, and he goes again for the Sho Tenkai, but changes over to the GTR, and that gets countered with an inside cradle. Tanahashi catches Goto in 14 minutes and 11 seconds, and Goto, after the 3 count, reverses, going for the cover. This was very much like you would see in a fight where the guy gets submitted and doesn't realize the match is over and goes after the referee or something. I love this ending. I thought it was such a great end, and it seems to be like Goto, who has been always the bridesmaid. It's kind of like, okay, you are getting into the latter portion of your career, and now you are 2 losses deep, and the frustration is mounting for him. But I just thought this was a really clever finish to do, and I thought they executed it terrific.
It was a surprising finish, but one that I also enjoyed. You know, it was just a really kind of a sneak small package from out of nowhere. It was a relatively quick match by Tanahashi G1 standards, it feels, but this was also an opener and very appropriately timed as a result. But it was also very fast paced from the jump. There was really no feeling out process that you usually get in these main events. They just entered right into their fast sequences. I wouldn't necessarily say there was anything all that out of the ordinary from it. You know, body part work, some signature moves. Really good fire from Tanahashi, but I did also like the surprise out of nowhere finish. It was ultimately, I think, like an above average television match that you might get to see on North American broadcast.
We should also mention that, so this was their second straight night at Ota Ward Gymnasium. The A Block show drew 1,284 on Thursday, and you could just see, Wei, like this building looked pretty bare at times, and the announced attendance 816, which is dismal for the G1.
Yeah. I mean, they're playing by a very different standard right now, and you know, seemingly just trying to accumulate as many people as they can throughout the course of this entire very strenuous tournament. So, it's something that I've gotten a bit more used to 4 shows in, but you know, if you're just coming from like an AEW Grand Slam to something like this, it really does feel like something from a year ago rather than, you know, now. And it's something you have to just kind of bear with, unfortunately, with this G1. What's your rating for the match?
For this one, I went large with a milk sugar. Large with a milk and sugar. I didn't go XL territory on this one, but I really enjoyed this match.
I went large 1 cream for this one, and I guess if you guys are not familiar, yes, we do have a coffee rating system specific for the G1, where large pretty much translates to like a 3-star match, and medium a 2-star, XL 4-star, and so on.
Double
and so
XL, that's
the pinnacle.
Creme de la creme, folks. That's the high,
or the milk de la milk,
which I reserve for Takagi and Ishii.
I have not hit double XL territory yet, but maybe it was still early for me. You know, I was coming off of a caffeine, you had
a 4-day drought. You were caffeineless for 4 days. You told us
exactly. Yeah, easing my way into it.
All right. Any cans of Coke being thrown at today's B Block?
No, I'm actually drinking a seltzer. Much to
non-alcoholic, I hope.
Non-alcoholic, no, but peach flavored.
Ooh. Chase Owens versus Tama Tonga, another pair of 0-1 participants. They 2-sweeted before, and Tonga would work on the arm. Owens did this hip toss into a neck breaker, followed by a swinging version, and Kevin Kelly was bringing up, you know, his honoring Bobby Eaton. They also mentioned how he came up with Tracy Smothers, 2 individuals that passed away over the last year, and Owens catches them with a snap German, follows with a backbreaker. We get a Tiger Driver, and then turns that into an STF as they bring up Masahiro Chono, Mr. G1. The gun stun gets blocked, and Owens hits a V-trigger, jewel heist for a 2 count, hits another knee strike, and goes for the package pile driver. You think it's over, and in midair, Tama Tonga counters into the gun stun, and he wins in 13 minutes, and the idea is that Chase Owens is still chasing his first G1 victory.
You know, earlier I mentioned that, you know, the B block on the surface, I think, is not a very attractive roster at all, and matchups that are stemming from that roster certainly don't look great on paper. This was one of those. but boy, did it completely over deliver. I thought this match was great. Like, it got to the point where um I was flirting with XL territory towards the finish, and my feeling was like, if only they can stick that landing. And I think, boy, did they stick that landing here. Getting
Great
this
finish.
gun stun out of nowhere to counter the package pile driver. I thought it was great. These two greatly exceeded my expectations. I think, much like maybe the first opening round matches, we didn't really get to see it so much, but I definitely got the sense that both Chase Owens and Tama Tonga were taking this tournament incredibly seriously. Both men here, I think, were elevating their games, getting in great shape, introducing fresh moves, thinking about creative entries into those moves. I thought Chase was awesome here. The action and pace in this one was really high, really sound. Zero Bullet Club bullshit. They were wrestling on an absolutely straight wrestling match. Even the Jado distraction simply came because Chase was wanting to send Jado a look, a message, as if to say, like, oh, you want to corner that guy and not me? Okay. But then, that allowed Tama Tonga to get the advantage. Like, it was just straight up wrestling. So I thought they hit it for me. I'm going XL for this one.
Oh, my goodness.
And I truly believe that's not simply grading on a curve. This was an exciting, well-worked match with a very creative, well-executed, out-of-nowhere finish.
I went large, 1 milk, 1 sugar, and I threw in a sleeve for the finish. I too enjoyed this. I thought that they did a very good job, and I think they're two of the participants that get a lot of flack from people, and I think that there is that kind of chip on their shoulders in this tournament that we're seeing just 2 matches in, especially from Chase. And I guess, we saw the jewel heist, but Chase Owens also the coffee heist from Wei Ting here.
Man, forget seeking his first G1 win. I mean, this guy's after a double XL, I think.
Obviously so. So Tama Tonga advances and gets 2 points, and Chase remains winless, which I guess will be a story that they continue to tell. We'll see how long they go with this one. Jeff Cobb and Yoshihashi. I thought that Jeff Cobb has been on a sensational run of late. I think everything is coming together for him. And this was a match where this guy worked like he was a foot taller and like that much, he just worked like the biggest monster in comparison to Yoshihashi. And I think he took various elements of Matanza that have now morphed with the Jeff Cobb foundational style that we're most accustomed to, because they were very distinct together. And I think this match was a perfect amalgamation of both. And I am not going to forget to give credit to Yoshihashi, because I think he made that work as well, playing ping pong ball for this guy. We got Chris Charlton busting out Aloha Cobb. Shout out OSW. So they Cobb launched Yoshihashi in the air for this big back body drop, and then went into a series of big belly to bellies, spin cycle, and then Yoshihashi pops off the shoulders, lands a dragon suplex, and we get Yoshihashi with the flower power for you Mario Brothers fans, and he just goes nuts.
Flower power or the invincible star?
I always say it's firepower. It's you get the flower, so it's technically flower power, but it gave him the ability to throw fire. So I would always get those crossed up in like Mario 1. Flower power Yoshihashi here. Lariat, Canadian Destroyer, running double knees, and they're explaining that Cobb is just too big for him to apply the butterfly lock, so he's going for Karma, and twice it gets blocked. The tour gets stopped, and he fakes out Karma and cradles Cobb, who kicks out, nails Yoshihashi with this shoulder block from hell, and then just holds on to the wrist, doesn't even bounce him off the ropes, just like ripcords him into the Tour of the Islands. 13 minutes and 22 seconds. I thought these two had a great match.
I thought so too. I thought it was a match, you mentioned Cobb. I thought he conveyed that monster presence really well here. And it was interesting to like watch and kind of study his demeanor throughout, because he was approaching this one as if it was like, like big brother who's about to toy with the little brother, not really taking him seriously. But this is also a little brother who constantly refuses to give up and has a great deal of heart. So, and I thought Cobb like expressed that really well throughout the match. He was kind of like somewhat lackadaisical and almost like, not that excited about the match to start, but his urgency, of course, would increase as Yoshihashi built fire. I mean, to me, this is like Yoshihashi's perfect type of match, perfect type of opponent. He's great at playing a David to anybody's Goliath, desperately firing up repeatedly, fighting from underneath. Built a really nice near fall with that cradle counter to the tour of the island that I definitely bid for. So I really enjoyed this. Again, it's kind of what you would expect from either of these two men, but I think each is probably one of the other's better combinations in this block. So I went large, 1 cream, 1 sugar.
And I think it's worth pointing out, like, these first 3 matches I thought were very enjoyable. Mm-hmm. I'm not going to say any were, standout. Even, I was going to say match of the year territory. Honestly, of the week we've had, it's not match of the week territory. But, the art of the 13 to 14 minute G1 match is something that's maybe a little underappreciated, that, you can certainly see that there is a bit of a pattern, that some of the big matches were teasing the time limits, probably to give you the incentive that down the road we're going to see many flirt with a time limit, and you're going to be invested that we could get a finish at 29:30 and they could go the full 30. So that's kind of the balance of doing those long matches as well. And
something I've been afraid of, like, prior to entering this G1 was, like, New Japan has had a real trend of booking a number of their matches on their cards to go at least 30, if not more, or at least just slightly below in some of their prior shows. And I thought in this G1, with these shows continuing to be somewhat bare, that they would still want to do that for even some of these relatively, like, low interest undercard matches. And they haven't. Like, these matches on the undercard are, like, going a very appropriate length. Even, like, a semi-main is going, like, not that much more than 20. Even the main event tonight, they're keeping most of the time well under the 30-minute time limit, and it's made for, like, in the case of tonight, I think a very good paced show.
Well, the longest match of the night was Taichi and Sanada, both 1-0. There's a lot of playing to the crowd and stalling in the early portion.
There's a big Peck pop-off here.
The Peck pop-off.
Which was a continuation of a prior match that these two had. And they were really... fuck, I was going to say milk. They were really milking it, which is a terrible choice of words here. But it was fun, I thought, and actually quite impressive, I suppose. But I think you definitely got the sense these two were going longer.
Yes. These two, for the sake of our rankings, certainly provided the milk. Would they add the sugar? That would be the question in these 25 minutes. The audience is clapping along. Taichi's selling his back, unable to lift Sanada at different points. And then Taichi pops up from a tiger driver, hits a dangerous suplex. And then there's another tiger suplex. And both are selling the effects of this, where they can't get their bearings and both just stumble through the ropes to the floor.
That particular sequence was really interesting to me, and Charlton, quickly pointed out here, using this as a space to kind of explain the differences between King's Road and Strong Style. But I mean, those choice of maneuvers I didn't think were coincidental at all. I mean, it was the tiger driver, the tiger suplex versus the dangerous backdrop, which to me totally felt like it was a Misawa Kawada tribute sequence.
Yeah, I thought Chris had a great breakdown for those unfamiliar. The pants come off at the 19-minute mark. And the skull end gets stopped. There's a chokeslam that gets blocked. They're just having constant counters. O'Connor roll, Gato clutch. Taichi finally gets the clutch, only gets a 2 count, and Sanada gets up. TKO, but moonsault lands on the knees of Taichi. Sanada then flips off the turnbuckle, and they nearly messed up the spot, but went right back into a striking battle. Sanada catches him with a drop kick. There's a kick out from the O'Connor roll. Again goes for a moonsault, landing on his feet, and gets fired, Taichi fires up with a forearm and catches him with Black Mephisto and pins him in 25 minutes and 14 seconds.
I thought the match was fantastic. Really fantastic. I think Taichi could be really hit and miss, but tonight he was absolutely a hit. This was to me, Taichi near his best. And I think much of the reason for that is due to him having to keep up with the incredible pace of his opponent. Sanada was great here, working a really solid, well-paced 25 minutes. They started slower, but I didn't think it was boring at all. Some of the bells and whistles I think are necessary for these longer matches, and I kind of thought the Peckoff was a lot of fun. Once the 10-minute mark hit, though, these two were going very fast with a ton of really amazing sequences, counter on top of counter on top of counter. I love that like whole sequence with the Gato clutch into the Euro clutch, back into the Gato clutch, and then back into the Euro clutch. I thought it was very creative, and as they were entering sort of like the plus 20-minute depths of this match, it got into that very sweaty, hard fought, warlike feel, but they were still nailing all of these very intricate sequences. So I was really impressed by this one. It was my match of the night, XL1 Cream.
Wow. I wasn't as high on the match as you were. I thought it was a perfectly satisfactory match. 25 was a little long for me, and I think it was more so the beginning portion that took me a while to get into this. But once they got going, the chemistry was certainly there. And I appreciated like the story that they were telling, which was very different and accentuated by the commentary that I think helped this one a lot. So I still went large with a milk and sugar. We'll throw in a sleeve there, but I'd put it a hair below. I really enjoyed Cobb and Yoshihashi before this, but again, there was a pretty consistent line through all of this. Like this was unlike the A block. Like the A block, it's just like total two sides of the coin that we're reviewing these A block shows as.
Yeah, like it's very easy to choose what matches to skip and what matches to watch when you're talking A block. With B block, you can already tell, like, I mean, there's probably not as much consensus between even you and I about what the match of the night was.
I think you could argue with me any of these four matches being your favorite match of the show, and I'm not going to deny it. To be honest, I think my match of the show was Tanahashi Goto, but I mean, that just goes to show you. Okada and Evil was the headliner. A lot of history between these two, and they're both 1-0 after their respective wins over the weekend. Evil is working on the back of Okada, and Okada is wearing these multicolored trunks that Chris Charlton explains is about unifying the world during these times.
Maybe he's just a big NXT 2.0 fan.
Oh my goodness! I didn't even put that together. It was a very, very similar color scheme.
Big Braun Breaker fan.
Obviously. I know. Yeah, maybe the whale in the rain. No, I couldn't. I'm trying to make a whale reference, and I just can't. I tried. I just screwed that one up. Okada gets run into Abe, the timekeeper. I hate the spot at this point. It's the biggest groan of any New Japan show is the timekeeper spot. I don't think there's any heat attached to it. It's just a groan.
Well, unfortunately, like, I think at this point, it's Evil's biggest spot.
Well,
like, it's
sad.
the biggest thing he has, because I don't think any of his other stuff works any better.
So, we fast forward here. Okada hits the elbow off the top. He does the Rainmaker pose, but then the hair is pulled, and Evil grabs Red Shoes, allowing Dick Togo to hit Okada with a chair from the floor. A few minutes later, Okada again comes back, drop kick, spinning tombstone, and he stops all of Evil's efforts, but the Rainmaker gets ducked, and Red Shoes is launched into Okada. So Red Shoes is dead. Evil hits a low blow. Red Shoes is still out of it. Okada still comes back. Money clip. Togo runs in. They stop.
There was another like Red Shoes ref bump here that just I don't even know what was supposed to happen, but like they barely made contact, and it was awful. Like it looked terrible.
Well, whether it was blunt force trauma or a blow and spot, this guy doesn't call anything. This also happened in the ring, so I think we can throw that one out as well. The Magic Killer gets stopped. Toe goes in and takes a shotgun drop kick, and there's a spinning Rainmaker that gets ducked. Evil hits Darkness Falls, and Red Shoes comes to and realizes, you know what? It must have been the gust of wind that sent me into Okada. It could not have been Evil. So he just counts after being massacred, and the kick out occurs. Evil runs into Okada's version of Everything is Evil, landslide tombstone, Rainmaker, and wins in 21-48. Nice closing sequence, but man, the bullshit was high in this one. I soured on this main event.
I did too. I thought I was not impressed at all. You know, it wasn't excruciating and overly long like many Evil main events have been, but there was absolutely nothing about this that I felt made it worth watching. If there was one clear match I would not recommend, it would actually be this main event. You have your very standard, slow opening pace, bundled with a lot of your Bullet Club crutches here. It's like more importantly, I found it disappointing for Okada in a main event and in the G1. In a show where you have guys like Sanada, Taichi, and even like a Chase Owens giving like max effort, it just felt like Okada on cruise control, doing sort of bare minimum effort in a match. Nothing inventive from him here. And as far as pace goes, it felt like they pretty much waited until the last 20, after the 20-minute mark was when the pace finally started to open up. But then the match just quickly ended after that, so you kind of left even unsatisfied for that reason. So I'm going medium. 1 cream, 1 sugar, 1 sleeve here, which is probably like among the lowest I've ranked an Okada match.
Well, everyone can enjoy my interpretive rating for this match. I give it a large with cream, and I hate cream.
Whoa. Damn. Wait a second. So a large with cream, I mean,
what does that mean? What does that mean? Am I going to even drink it?
Yeah, exactly. I think that's even worse than a medium, because I think if somebody handed you a medium black coffee, would you drink that above?
Oh, 100%. Dude, I like black coffee. I get black coffee.
You would drink that above a large with cream inside.
Yeah. So there you go. That's my gimmick throughout this, is my interpretive ratings as well. I'm going to have fun with this. But yeah, skip this main event. I didn't enjoy it all that much. The work from Okada was fine. They're very much trying to push. First of all, the 3 count occurs and Kevin Kelly just yells, "Hell yeah." And they explain their roles as objective journalists, but they admit they're both extremely happy Evil lost. And it's not that they are pro-Okada. They are anti-Evil. And they talk about how Okada has this spring in his step. They have not seen him like this in a long time, and signaling the old Rainmaker is back, and that this is Okada kind of turning back the clock and making people remember who this guy is.
Well, in terms of storyline, in terms of character, in terms of, I guess, win-loss record, I totally understand where they're coming from. But I suppose on a more of a, I don't know, critical performance level, I can't really go with that same opinion.
So after today's show, the B block looks like this. Cobb, Okada, and Taichi are on top with 4 points, followed by Tanahashi, Sonata, Evil, and Tamatonga with 2. And in the basement are Chase Owens, Yoshihashi, and Hiroki Goto with nothing.
Okay, everybody. Now, this is the point in the show where we update you all on the G1 Climax 31 contest standings. Of course, you can find these results from Chris Angler every single week, every single episode, looking at the show description here for a link, or you can go to postwrestling.com/G1 for these results. And as John mentioned, we have our current standings, and at the moment, we have a clear frontrunner on the leaderboard. Zach Smith leads the pack with 22 points out of a possible, what are we talking about now, John? Possible 30 points? Is that right?
How
many people?
We've had 4 shows.
5 matches per show.
Yeah, so 30 matches, yeah.
40 points.
Okay, oh, yeah, 5 matches. No, it's because it's screwed up because now we have like the non-tournament matches on the A block show. So we had 1 show of the A block with 5, and yesterday's was 4.
Okay.
So,
but
15,
the points still
19 matches we have had of the G1.
Whatever.
You're including the forfeit. Okay, I'm done.
Whatever. Okay, Zach Smith has 22 points, which is really high because no one else has 22 points. And then we have a tie for second with 19 points each. D Lama, Eric J, and Joe Sullivan. And then just a huge logjam for third place at 18 points. So I'm not even going to attempt to read it. Very interesting today, the Daily Perfect Club. A lot of people got perfect scores here. And I'm not even going to read this too because there are a lot of people here. But this was a show that evidently was one where almost relatively easy to predict. The only underdog that got a victory here was Taichi beating Sonata. Only 38% of people predicted Taichi to win. But of course, the all-important post-wrestling C block standings, pitting the post-wrestling contributors against each other in the G1 standings. And we have a new leader, John. Kate from Montreal leads the C block at 18 points, scoring a perfect card today, 5 out of 5. So maybe a new queen of C block.
Look at that. Kate is on fire.
Kate from Montreal doing tremendously well. She is followed by Brad the Archivist at 17 points. Randobot coming in third place, tied with Mike Murray at 14 points. And then Vivian Murray, 13 points, tied with Eric Marcotte, 13 points. And Mark Buckledy, our A-block reviewer, unfortunately at the very bottom here at 12 points. So You can see Mark's thoughts. Maybe he'll be shocked at the number of these results because he only predicted 2 victories out of the 5 today.
Oh boy. Well, it's still early in the tournament, so we will see how everyone performs down the stretch. But the G1 will continue Sunday, and we are going to have a show out for you on Sunday with the A block featuring Kota Ibushi versus Zack Sabre Jr. that I think should be stellar. Tomohiro Ishii versus Kenta, Tanga Loa versus Toru Yano, the Great Okan versus Yujiro, and then a pair of non-tournament matches with Shingo Takagi against Yuji Nagata and Master Wato versus Kotei Fujita. I think this is going to be a tale of 2 shows once again on Sunday.
Very likely. And sorry, what are the matches that you're looking forward to again? Sorry, we're talking about the 26th, right?
Yes. Yeah. Ibushi
right, okay.
and Zack, I think everyone's going to expect high things from that. And honestly, the next one I'm most interested is like Shingo and Nagata. Like, it's very rare you're going to get a singles match between those two. And you're also in Kobe World Hall with, the history of Shingo with Dragon Gate in that building. So, the rest of the Ishii and Kenta is,
should be good. I think.
I hope so, because if it's not, that's an indictment on Kenta if it's not. And then the rest, we'll see. Toru Yano has not been doing it for me in this tournament, and I can't say Great Okan and Yujiro inspires a lot of optimism either. But
I'm predicting
I go in with an open mind.
Yeah, I'm predicting one of those two will be aiming towards like what the lowest rating of the block, at least in this G1.
I think Yano and Kenta have that spot to themselves, but it could be threatened. And then the next B block show is not until Wednesday. Looking forward to a little break with Okada versus Yoshihashi, Tanahashi versus Tamatonga, Jeff Cobb against Goto, which probably continues the losing streak for Goto, and then Sonata versus Chase Owens, and Evil versus Taichi.
Yeah, I mean, at this point, I there are some storylines that are kind of appearing in the G1 thus far, but I thought we would have a clear losing streak story with Kota Ibushi, and he lost to Yujiro in the opening round, and then just ended up winning in the second match. So I don't know if we can assume anything at this point. But one thing is clear, and it's that Zack Sabre Jr. is on a real hot streak. He of course beat Tetsuya Naito, injured him, unfortunately. But they are taking that as a storyline point for him. So he beat Tetsuya Naito, knocked the guy out of the tournament completely. And then he beat the IWGP champion in Shingo Takagi last night. So he's on a very hot streak right now and will probably be one to watch.
So let's move on over to AEW Dynamite viewership from Wednesday night. They did 1,273,000 viewers, 627,000, which is a 0.48 in the 18 to 49 demo. From Brandon Thurston and Showbuzz Daily. These are the third highest numbers in the history of Dynamite, behind the October 2019 premiere and the show from a few weeks ago in Cincinnati following All Out that had the television debuts of Danielson, Cole, and Ruby Soho. It won the night on cable. They were number 1, and they won several. They were number 1 in cable in males 18 to 49, as well as adults 25 to 54, and I thought it was a very strong number, and I think the only resistance you would see is people that thought that this would break the record. I didn't think they had a prayer of touching that. That first show that they did a 0.68 in the demo, and that's going to take an unbelievable effort for them to approach that level. And the audience, you can look at it however you want, but did you have any strong thoughts on the number from Wednesday, Way?
Yeah, I mean, much the same as you. I think, much of the, it's just, I thought we were done with this like whole, ratings war, quick reaction type of thing that we would get on these Thursdays, but it continues with like people's, I think, very quick to judge hot takes on, oh, this number is not bigger than this number. That means like this company's going down or like such and such.
I think that so misses the big picture. Yeah. And it's like, you brought this up the other day, and I think like it's a fallacy to just look week to week of the Dynamite and Raw number. However, the overall trend is that AEW and Raw are neck and neck at the moment. That's the story. And that's a very important one. And the next question I will say is that once football season is over, where is AEW in the grand scheme of things, and how close is that going to be? It's the bigger story that is important. And I think that's why you have the comparison points. Like, it is, here we are 2 years in, and AEW is neck and neck with Raw. Like, we're talking, Raw did win this week in the 18-49 demo, but it was by the slightest of margins, as was Dynamite when it beat Raw. Like, we are talking razor thin advantages either side.
Ultimately, the only story that matters is what the trends are that these shows will have accumulated by the time that their TV deals are up.
Right.
And so these kind of week to week comparisons, they're fun, I suppose, you know, if you want to get into it, but hardly anything I think to take super seriously comparing one episode to another, especially when they're not in the same night, not against the same competition. But you're right, like the trends are that these shows are very close together. But I also don't get too caught up about whether or not like this one happened to be the biggest Dynamite rating of all time or not. It's in the range. You know, it's the third highest one that they've had.
No one should be scoffing at winning the night and doing your third biggest number in history. It's a very relative argument if you're going the other way.
Now I was curious about like, you know, the structure of the show and how that would hold up in the quarter hours. And of course we thank Brandon Thurston from WrestleNomics for contributing some of these charts. And it looks like the first quarter started with 1.258 million viewers, peaking in the second portion of the Danielson Omega match with 1.373 million viewers, and then tapering slightly with the CM Punk promo, and then dipping to 1.19 million for the Brian Pillman Jr. to MJF, but holding on really strong all the way until the main event with Britt Baker and Ruby Soho at 1.249 million. So do you have any assessments about, you know, the structure of the show, John?
No, like I thought it was the right call to make starting off because I think it was notable the fact that they grew after that first quarter, which you would hope for, you know, putting out a multi-segment match of that magnitude that it would grow throughout. I think you look at the second hour, overall viewership, I mean, it's as much of a straight line as you're going to get for viewership. 18-49 did drop, like the lowest it hit was 564 for the final segment of the show. But like overall, when you're looking at entire viewership, I mean, I thought by starting off hot, it told me that the majority of this audience, they wanted to stick around for the whole show. This was not, we were just here for Omega Danielson. Like there was a strong retention throughout the show.
It's a interesting study. I mean, I'm looking at, you know, just some of the prior charts, and we're talking about Dynamite. I mean, 2 weeks ago was their big one, correct? It was the one with what am I talking about here? CM Punk. So the one with Moxley and Suzuki, the promo, like the one right after All Out, featuring Kenny Omega, Danielson, that first segment from 2 weeks ago, that hit a 1.453 million with a 755 Prime Demo rating. So nothing on this edition of Grand Slam hit that. But it also makes you wonder, like, would the show have done better if they put like Danielson Omega towards the end, or was it simply the freshness coming off of All Out that made that difference?
I think coming off of All Out, you had an unprecedented level of buzz for AEW, and seeing Danielson for the first time on TV, as well as the other arrivals. I just think like the overall buzz, like following All Out, contributed to that as much as anything. Like there was just so much from what they did on the Sunday.
Yeah, I tend to agree.
And next week they're in Rochester, New York, and we only have the one match announcement so far. And then of course it's the 2-hour Rampage tonight that has Moxley and Kingston against Minoru Suzuki and Lance Archer, Anna Jay against Penelope Ford, Lucha Brothers Santana and Ortiz against Private Party, Butcher and the Blade, Men of the Year against Jericho and Hager, Bucks and Adam Cole against Christian, Jungle Boy and Luchasaurus, and CM Punk versus Powerhouse Hobbs. So this is going to be another intriguing number to see how they do in a 2-hour format on TNT.
I've actually managed to avoid spoilers up until this point, John.
Yes.
So
I nearly ruined something for you, but caught myself.
No. I'm even if I saw spoilers at this point, it's whatever. But John and I will be covering that show along with Friday Night SmackDown tonight for all Post Wrestling Cafe patrons. Again, we will not be taking calls on this particular episode, but we will be taking calls and making Sunday's Extreme Rules post show live for all patrons. So stick with us for that. But yeah, post shows every Friday night covering SmackDown and Rampage exclusively for patrons at postwrestlingcafe.com.
Yes, and in addition, tonight on the site, we'll have a report from the Cubs fan at Lucha Blog on CMLL's 88th anniversary card. This is traditionally one of the big shows of the year, but I think CMLL interest is dramatically down this year with the company and its state. But we will have a report up on that site and see what comes out of that, as well as John Pine will be covering the GCW event tonight. Get Lost a Lot from the Melrose Ballroom, which they have announced is sold out, headlined by Minoru Suzuki and Homicide. And this is coming off of last night's emo fight that I know you were paying attention to.
Unfortunately, I didn't get to watch the show, but I'm certainly interested. And the buzz coming off of it is like, yeah, like Minoru Suzuki versus Homicide, I'm sure will be awesome. But Nick Gage DJing My Chemical Romance is like the type of amazing weirdness that I just really appreciate GCW for. I mean, these clips are showing up last night. First of all, I didn't even know like they were advertising Nick Gage as the DJ for this emo night. The idea of even an emo night being put on by this wrestling company is
so
hilarious.
Smart. It like so taps into like their prime audience of like mid 2000s teenagers that this is so relevant to. This company, and they're riding their hottest streak, like attendance wise, like since the Matt Cardona Nick Gage match, like they have been at a pretty solid level when it comes to like what they're drawing. Like they are doing some fantastic numbers, and they are right on the pulse of the wrestling fan.
Yeah, you know, I would say that they were, but at the same time, it's like, how could you predict that? Like, and I don't know how well the show is gonna do, but like, I definitely think that this is a bit of a left field like idea, but they commit to it and they go for it, and it sounded like it was incredibly fun. John Pine has a report up on the site right now, and some of the highlights from it include like Allie Catch, who is going by Allie Way, I suppose, in tribute to My Chemical Romance's Gerard Way. Mid match, she like broke into like she used her opponent's limb to sing a rendition of Ohio is for Lovers by Hawthorne Heights. Seemed like Marco Stunt did a performance and ended up playing like Stacy's mom. A dude ended up like, somebody came out to like Break Stuff by Limp Bizkit, which is not emo at all, but of the era, I suppose. But of course the main event featured Jimmy Jacobs. And they advertised this in advance, but ROH fans will appreciate the fact that he was advertised to perform The Ballad of Lacey, and was not able to do it due to interruption from Atticus Cogar, but of course defeated him, and then Lacey came up for a save in a post-match attack, and that's where we got the big live performance of The Ballad of Lacey. You remember that song, John?
I did. That was a very, very popular angle in Ring of Honor. So that was, again, like tapping into what the audience is going to recognize, and that was a huge part of Jimmy Jacobs' I think independent career was that whole storyline. I was really hoping. I did not watch the show, but man, between Lloyd and Jacobs on the show, I mean, it just opens the door for something Jimmy Eat World related, does it not?
Yeah, and I think that would fit within the definition.
Does that consider itself? That would be my emo group of choice if they are such.
Maybe more like early 90s emo, like Weezer type of emo. But sure, somebody can inform us whether or not it fits.
All right. So yeah, they're back tonight, and Minoru Suzuki Homicide is the big match there. Taiji Shimori is also on the show, taking on Tony Deppen. But let's move on to the Dark Side of the Ring episode that went down on Thursday night, the double life of Chris Kanyon. And this was one that, I mean, you knew it was going to be like a very, another, tough series of subjects to cover. Chris Kanyon, he was a pretty like well-known enhancement talent in the early portion of his career. He came out of Sunnyside, New York, and began his wrestling career in April of 1992 and bounced around all over the place, but started popping up in Memphis, Smoky Mountain, ECW, and then doing jobs on WWF and WCW television that I'm sure you can find online. But of course, the big break comes in WCW, where he had been part of the Men at Work team that they did show some highlights of.
But more measuring things for no apparent reason, as Chris Jericho said.
Yeah, he did the spots where like he would get the measuring tape and measure before he'd do like a moonsault off the top and miss the mark or something like that.
That's hilarious.
Like just goofy
so
stuff
dumb,
that would be so popular today. But then gets the Mortis character. And when they came up with Mortis, I mean, this was Eric Bischoff's huge idea of, you would have these 4 easily licensable characters in Mortis, Wrath, the Cat, Ernest Miller, and then Glacier, Ray Lloyd, as these 4. And that was the whole impetus for Blood Runs Cold. And they ran these spots forever. It became a running joke. And, as they stated here, like the NWO took off and Blood Runs Cold, it ran cold. And they didn't really get much of anything out of this. It felt very out of place where WCW was going in this more realistic direction. And yet you had these cartoon characters that just felt like it really emphasized the generational shift of pro wrestling in just really a year's time, where WCW had been doing a lot more of that kind of over the topness with the Dungeon of Doom and such. And now we were moving into a bit of a more serious direction, especially for our main event scene. So that character really never took off much. And, Kanyon noted in his book that he had been told in WCW that, we just don't think that skulls are that marketable. And had to have been amusing as he saw who would become the biggest merchandise seller of all time, right around that same period. But he gets unmasked as Chris Kanyon, and he feuds with the Flock, then got involved in the tag team, which I thought was a very underrated threesome that they had with Chris Kanyon, Bam Bam Bigelow, and DDP as the Jersey Triad. And I remember a pair of pay-per-view matches that they did with Saturn and Benoit that I was a big fan of those matches at the time. And then he went through all the other different characters. He was also the one tasked with Eric Bischoff thought very highly of Kanyon and sent him out as one of the main choreographers for Ready to Rumble when they did the Jesse Ventura movie, which was filmed up here in Toronto. And that was when he was stationed up here. And I remember him doing The Law in studio during that time. And this was when The Law was on at 1 a.m, and he was on it for like the whole 2 hours. And I thought he was just the most engaging guest. It's like a very down to earth person, like you could hear when he was taking calls, and very evident that this was such a big wrestling fan. And to me, it was like, what an interesting guy that this does not come out on television. And in an interesting trivia note, he was supposed to be the guest on The Law the night that Owen Hart died, and they had to scrap their guests. It was going to be Kanyon and Edge on the show, and they obviously had to change everything once that news occurred, because the Jesse Ventura movie was airing the same night as that Over the Edge pay-per-view, which was a brilliant idea by NBC to go against a WWF pay-per-view at the time. But anyway, we don't have to go through his entire career. I think most would be familiar with Kanyon, but he went through many more gimmick changes in WCW. It was positively Kanyon at one point, Chris Champagne Kanyon, and then goes over to the WWE during the Invasion storyline. And, it just, in his book, it's interesting to look at. Like, the WWF period is limited to like 15 pages in this like near 300-page book. Like, it's a very small portion. And then he's let go in 2004. And then afterwards, that's when he comes out. It's in 2006 and goes on Howard Stern. He did a lot of like publicity stunts to try and get attention on himself, that didn't really work out all that well for him. And it's in 2004 that he's also diagnosed as bipolar. And he cites 11 concussions that he's aware of that he had in pro wrestling. And I think it's those 3 elements, someone that struggled with his sexuality, compounded with just an industry that plays with your head regardless of, someone that is bipolar, that's only going to compound things. And then you throw in the concussions. Like, that to me is like what impact each had on the other. Who is to say? But I think the fact is those are 3 very important factors when looking at the untimely death of Chris Kanyon in 2010.
Yeah, certainly. While you mentioned, many people being familiar with Chris Kanyon, certainly, if you started watching wrestling in the 90s, you'd be very familiar with his various iterations. I think, most will probably remember him for, a period after his wrestling career where he came out and did sort of like the Howard Stern run and whatnot. But I even personally like was not really so privy to a lot of his mental struggles that were very much outlined and focused on in this episode, and brilliantly so, and tragically so. Just, I knew him as a wrestling character. I knew him as, this great kind of the innovator of offense. This guy who would always do incredibly flashy, like video game types of moves. But I don't think for a second did I necessarily consider all the incredible inner struggle that he would have had throughout that entire time. And so in this episode, I felt, first of all, you get a real great glimpse as to like the amount of people that he influenced just simply as a wrestler. You get to hear from, of course, Brian Cage, who like has modeled much of his gimmick or his catchphrases around Chris Kanyon, but also the Young Bucks, who Matt spoke at length about, at one time Chris Kanyon being one of his closer friends and having some, very, hard to deal with conversations with him over the phone, trying to
when Matt was 19, like that's a very tough phone call to have with somebody that, number one, you look at in kind of that hero lens, but on top of that, that's a lot for a 19-year-old, and I think Matt conveyed that, like, to be so to hear someone so distraught and knowing that your words could have an impact on life or death.
Yeah, it was Kanyon threatening to kill himself over the phone with Matt Jackson at 19 years old, and so I had no idea. Maybe like their relationship was perhaps that deep and that personal. But I think the main, I would say, feature, or at least the main talking head of this episode was James Mitchell, who managed Mortis and remained a close personal friend of Kanyon's up until his death. But he was just so open about everything, to do with Chris Kanyon's life and really his own life, that I found him incredibly captivating. And there were a lot of definitely like the Dark Side of the Ring is now really interesting because like not only are we assessing the subjects of the episodes themselves, coming off of the Ric Flair episode, I mean, we're really starting to assess how the people interviewed are coming across. And James Mitchell certainly doesn't shy away from mentioning some very unsavory things, maybe in his own relationship with Chris Kanyon. Like at one point, so Kanyon talks about like wanting to create a porno tape, like just so that he can prove to the other wrestlers that he's not gay. So James Mitchell talks about the story of them hiring a hooker to film this sex tape with a script and everything, and Kanyon never shows up. So, and please correct me if I'm wrong, John, but the insinuation was that James Mitchell took his place and filmed the tape. Is that right?
So Kanyon tells the story in his book. And I mean, that's the other thing. Like Jim Mitchell was extremely close with Kanyon. And I mean, Jim Mitchell, you can see he is all over this episode because he is a tremendous storyteller and a showman. But a lot of these stories, like the wild ones, like Kanyon writes about them in the book, like the story about the gay porn magazines flying out in front of his cousin. Like he writes about that in his book, and he mentions this video. He does not state that it was a hooker, and it's told in the story that Mitchell starts playing this tape for Kanyon, and it's Jim Mitchell having sex with the woman and then putting the mask on, and it's more graphic.
Okay, thank you. But it's very twisted. But I mean, as you mentioned, the story was out there, and Jim Mitchell, at least on national television, was not shy about like putting it out there. And that's just all to say that like he was very much an open book about many of the rough edges in both of their lives, and I goes into I think very tragic detail about some of these. I guess you can call them episodes that Chris Kanyon would have, where he would just almost kind of black out in these kind of violent rages and not even realize it until after the fact. And it's something that you really kind of, your heart breaks for it, because I don't think there would have been any sort of support structure for him at the time. Certainly not in this industry. And you just get the sense that this man was living with a lot of secrets that he had really nowhere to go to for help.
No, and I mean that is the other part of this is his treatment in WWE, and the angle with the Undertaker is focused on, and it's a very it comes off very badly, and it did at the time, that all of a sudden he is being asked to sing like Boy George, and his instructions were they want you to sing like the F word, and that's how he described it in the book as well, and he comes out singing as Boy George with like an exaggerated version of his lisp. And then Undertaker just beats the hell out of him and nails him with the chair from the other side. And he said he did suffer a concussion as a result of this.
Oh, the chair shot was, I mean, as
brutal.
rough as you would expect, from a pre-concussion sort of like caring era. Yeah. And you get the Bucks reaction to that because they were there live, and Kanyon was a hero.
I had no idea that the Bucks were there at that show.
Yeah. So they kind of represented the fan, in many people, being disappointed at seeing a returning wrestler basically get booked to shit. I found it really interesting that you have Raphael Morphy, who. Mm-hmm. I didn't really know. I've only seen him.
He's like the live events coordinator at AEW, and was an executive doing a similar role in WWE for years, and had worked at TNA.
And a close friend of Chris Canyon's.
Yeah, and until they announced that this episode and he was one of the subjects, I did not know his history with Kanyon.
So he maintains that the WWE, like, there was no malice in the booking of that segment, or at least like they did not book that Boy George segment to punish Kanyon for being gay. He maintains that. Do you have an opinion?
So, and again, like the thing is with Kanyon, and I don't mean this in a negative way, but after he left WWE, he said he made a lot of claims and he said a lot of stuff, and some of it was like there was a goal of getting back with a major company and creating attention for himself. Like, he went so far as to do interviews stating Bret Hart had privately told him Montreal was a work. I mean, he put a lot of stuff out there, and the biggest was he believing that the WWE fired him before he was gay. And that leads to the Howard Stern segment where Flair is kind of sent there on behalf of the company to deny that. I cannot say 100%, but I have a hard time believing that was the reason he was fired. Just based on the fact that I don't think that would have been the sole reason that he was fired. And in the Observer obit, I mean, it flat out states that Kanyon privately told his friends he knew that was not the case, but that was also something that was going to generate, that was going to be a story if he went out and spoke about that.
So that kind of gets into maybe one of the other hot button issues to come out of it, and that was, and I think people expected this, the playing of the Howard Stern clips, specifically of when John Cena and Ric Flair appeared on the show at separate times to basically kind of denounce the talents of Chris Kanyon.
Yeah.
And in Ric Flair's case, I mean, directly to Chris Kanyon, and you just, it's a very heartbreaking scene because, we know that Ric Flair was a hero of Chris Kanyon. So it's certainly like knowing.
And that to me, I thought both Flair and Cena came off very poorly there. It is one thing to say and defend that the company did not fire you because you were gay, but to diminish this guy's talents, I think that is, like, you can say, okay, this guy was not going to be Steve Austin, but he was a tremendous talent. And not included is a line from Chris Kanyon in this to Ric Flair stating, Rick, if I was such a bad performer, then why did you have me work and train your son, David?
Wow.
And he just checkmated Ric Flair on that one. Ric Flair has come out with a statement since then, and since last night's episode, and pretty much saying, like, the WWE, that was kind of part and parcel of adversarial talent or ex-talent that are out there.
I have it here if you want me to read it.
Sure, why don't you read it? I don't have it in front of me.
So Flair tweeted this last night, says, breaks my heart to hear later on that he took this so hard. Calling into guests that were seen as, quote unquote, hostile to WWE was part of the job then. I should not have said that nobody had, quote unquote, ever been released. There's no way I could have known that for sure. I think he means there's no way, he shouldn't have said that nobody had ever been released for being gay, is what he meant. He says, I was holding the company line Love is love is love is love, and everyone should be able to love whoever and however they choose without fear of reprisal. I wasn't a huge Canyon fan as a worker, but Chris Klukser, how do I say his last name?
Klutzeritz, I think, yeah.
Klukseritz was a hell of a good guy. This was not the last tweet that he would tweet in addition to this thread. He ended it with some sort of like joke that he since deleted about like
there was like Caitlyn Jenner reference.
And it was a very confusing line. I think it was his attempt at, trying to maybe say that, what am I going to get in trouble for next? I'm sort of this politically incorrect target right now. Like what's going to happen to me? But clearly it was like a terrible attempt at humor in a time that probably did not warrant it at all. And definitely continues to do no favors for Ric Flair's online persona, I will say.
Yeah. Again, like if Ric Flair did not like Canyon's style, like that's fine. You are allowed to have whatever opinion you have, but let's remember that Canyon, forget his WCW career where he was tasked with going out to put together wrestling scenes and go recruit cruiserweights. He had a great eye for talent. And in WWE, when he was rehabbing, he was sent down there to OVW. Like they saw, like this was someone that in a post wrestling career, I think would have been an outstanding producer for his clear openness to the style of the future and this younger generation that I think is very much, there's evidence of in this episode of how your Cages and Young Bucks and probably countless others looked up to. I think he would have been a terrific producer. He was, when Jay Leno came in for the Road Wild match, when Rodman was there to do the Savage match, it was Canyon that worked with these people to get them ready for these matches. So this was not a guy that was just strictly bell-to-bell wrestler. He was very much involved in training, in choreography. So to diminish his talents in that way, I think that comes off very empty.
Oh, it's super silly. Like anybody who I think has seen him wrestle knows that like the claims of him not being talented enough are ridiculous. And, Flair here, and I'm sure Cena, if asked, would probably claim the same, that they were towing the company line and just kind of like playing a soldier for Vince to, denounce a guy who's been tarnishing the company's reputation. I understand. But
also, I think, sorry to interrupt, but I think that also, and not to say that Ric Flair or John Cena are, I don't know what their response is to that, but, you go out there in public and you're quote unquote towing the company line in a way like that, you have to own that. It is your voice.
Yep.
It doesn't matter if you're just playing ventriloquist, that's on you.
Yeah. And I would say even so, even if you're a great soldier, which we know John Cena to be, and probably Ric Flair as well, I think there is a limit to like what you should be willing to do, to a fellow colleague in your industry. And as you mentioned, John, it's something you absolutely have to own, because you are ultimately the one saying those words. You're responsible for those words. And I felt like if you can criticize anything, it's the fact that maybe these two had very poor judgment, or just maybe even a lack of spine, to say something that perhaps they didn't truly believe.
And to be fair, if the company was releasing him and it was not over his sexuality, they absolutely have a right to defend themselves against that. And I think that's enough that you could have defended and said, hey, the company, not just looking at like a token, but Pat Patterson was a major officer in this company that was openly gay, and that did not prohibit his employment by the company. So anyway, his post wrestling years are very tough on him, and you're going to hear this in this interview, and it's difficult to hear. This is done in 2008, and he talks about the struggles of life after wrestling once you have made it to that level. And that was Canyon's hope, that was by coming out in a public forum and promoting himself as the first openly gay wrestler that is active, that it was going to be this big thing for him. And by 2006, it was applauded that he came out, but it was not enough that it was going to, it wasn't shocking either in 2006. And I just think he was looking at it as well from the side of it being, elevating him back into the limelight of the industry, which did not come to fruition for him.
No, that part is kind of, it's upsetting. I don't really know how to take it because, like, on the one hand, you feel for the guy not really having sort of like a role in the industry at the time, but on the other hand, I don't like it. Makes me feel kind of uncomfortable thinking that like he'd be like looking at something like that, a very personal thing, as sort of like a gimmick to use. But I think his intentions were also probably to be able to be a spokesperson, be
absolutely,
be an
and he was like he was doing speeches, and I mean he was looking at an advocacy role on top of this because he said that was one of the most difficult things is that like he realized he was gay like at a very young age. Like I'm talking like 9 or 10 years old, I think is the age he realizes this, and said he had no kind of gay role models. And that was a role he wanted to play. So this was by no means just looking at it from a selfish standpoint. I mean, he wanted to be an advocate for younger people in similar situations.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I have to imagine, whether or not he was the first person to come out, or at least, in modern times, I'm sure he still became that role model for many people, as they would kind of detail, in James Mitchell's final evening in person with Chris Kanyon. So yeah, they do kind of, go on to talk about, I suppose, his final days, and it was surprising to me that it was like him, it was like DDP, who all felt like they had a sense of where this was heading. And it was almost a feeling of like, not surprise, but just, I mean, in like Luke Cox's case, like almost elation that like, his very sick friend finally found some peace. But yeah, really, really sad.
Yeah. And I mean, that's coming from those that would have seen him at his lowest points. And I think looking at that, it was a very tragic end. He took his life in April of 2010, and he was only 40 years old. So yeah, it's a tragic story involving someone that I do believe that he would have been, I think, served a role, especially behind the scenes in where the wrestling industry was going. It's just the industry was not there yet. And I think he just did not see a place for himself in the industry at a certain point, which, like, let's remember, he is let go by WWE in 2004. And at that point, God, he's like mid-30s, early 30s. Like, that's a very young age to be looking at what's next for me when he was a lifelong, obsessed wrestling fan. Like, wrestling was his life.
It's for those reasons that I think we should all, no matter what your favorite wrestling company is, we should all be so eternally grateful that there is real alternative right now in the industry. And not just for the fans, but for the wrestlers to perform in. Like so many of these guys put so much of their entire lives dedication towards one goal. And when it doesn't pan out because there are only so many spots and this guy at the very top has a very specific taste for who he wants, it's not the end of their stories. And unfortunately for Chris Kanyon, like there really weren't those options for him then. He was a man like way ahead of his time.
He was, yeah. And I think if you watch like just go watch some of like whether it's the enhancement matches or his WCW matches, and you can just see like where this guy was trying to think and look ahead. And he had a great eye for talent when it came to being tasked with going out and bringing in different cruiserweights. Like he was very close with Shane Helms, who was not interviewed in this piece, but was very close with Chris Kanyon, as were many people. So we're going to end this now with this interview. This was from Fight Network Radio in May of 2008. And I had reached out to Kanyon to come on the show. And he was very excited to come on, not just to talk about his career, but he was also like big into MMA as well. And like you'll hear at the end here, he very much wants to get his MMA picks in for the upcoming series of cards. But I talk about how this guy's life was wrestling. Like he was very in tune with the pro wrestling media landscape. And I mean, when I emailed him and he responded, like he was very much aware of who I was and asking like, is this the world famous John Pollock? And, I was like, that's not a response I typically would get from guest subjects, but, he was somebody I did not have, beyond that, any interactions with him, but I thought this would be a very important interview to run as well with Mauro, who's been very open about his own, struggles and the two of them kind of sharing, those experiences. So this is Mauro Ranallo in conversation with Chris Kanyon.
It is Fight Network Radio, Hardcore Sports Radio, Sirius 186. My guest at this time, a former professional wrestler best known for his work in WCW and WWE. It's my pleasure to welcome Chris Kanyon to Fight Network Radio. How are you, Chris?
Doing great, man. How you guys doing?
Doing very well. Now, Chris, 15 years to the day after you entered the business of professional wrestling, your first fight fighting as Chris Morgan, you retired earlier this year, largely out of the industry now, but you become a frequent guest on Howard Stern. You're proving that, I guess, there is life after wrestling. What have you been doing since you left the Ring Wars?
Dude, a lot of it was the whole coming out process. That took, I wasn't even out to family after Vince fired me. And, it took me a good year of therapy and stuff to just get to, come to terms with that and being able to come out to family and friends. And that took a year. And then once I was comfortable with family and friends, then I went to the, went public with it. And originally did it up in Sudbury, Ontario, but then I did it on that pay-per-view that clip you guys just played. After that, even after that, there was still, life after wrestling's hard for guys that have made it. I was recently talking to Mean Mike. He's a guy who did some independent stuff around here in Florida and been around the business forever. And ran into him. He's bouncing at a bar, and he's the one that kind of opened my eyes to the fact that guys on the indie scene they all seem to do all right. As far as their regular life and mentally. Once you make it, once you're there for any kind of extended period, to try to live life after that, it puts us in a tough mental spot for a lot of us, and that's why you see so much drug abuse and suicide attempts and we have trouble adjusting afterwards.
Yeah, and Chris, obviously, you're still in that phase, as you've told us, and having to deal not only with hanging up your wrestling boots, but all of the goings on in your personal life. In 2006, you did come out of the closet. You stated that you believed your sexual orientation was in part the reason that you were let go by WWE in 2004. Do you still feel this way?
Yeah, I'll tell you what. When you're closeted and you're around a lot of guys, a lot of times guys show their true colors, and a lot of the guys that I was with in WCW ended up with power spots and management spots in WWE by the time I got there, and I'd already known they were homophobic. Just because by the fact that I was closeted and they didn't know I was gay, they talked openly about how much they disliked gays, and and then once I got up there, the rumors started in WCW. By the time I got up there, rumors were pretty strong, and I know for a fact that a lot of the guys that were in power disliked gays, and that they either heard the rumors and believed it, or figured there's a chance, so fuck them.
Well, did you feel at the time that you had anyone to turn to, though, in terms of, even though you were closeted and stuff, obviously you must have been feeling the pressure on an emotional basis, knowing what you knew about yourself, because right now, obviously, the wrestling world is dealing with the fact that racism seems to be rampant. We've seen Michael Hayes, a power guy in WWE, recently get suspended for 60 days for dropping the N-bomb on Mark Henry, and I'm just wondering, when you were involved in WCW and WWE, you see that there are a lot of power people that were homophobic. Is that something that is very prevalent in the industry?
Oh, dude, if people were suspended every time they dropped the FA bomb, there would be no management. It's just a lot more accepted to, call people, use the words like fag and queer and, faggot, homo, than it is to use the N-word. So it's just used a lot, especially in that high testosterone environment, a lot in WCW back in the 90s, and as well as when I got to WWE in 2001. There's no doubt about it. It's an issue.
Now, did this
to think that Orlando Jordan got fired and it had nothing to do with his sexuality is absolutely absurd. There's no doubt in my mind he was directly fired because he was gay. No doubt about it. Well,
now we've heard he's bisexual, but you feel that is the reason that he was let go is because of his sexual orientation.
Yeah, no doubt about it. They tie it to he had a friend in the back. It was a younger guy. If it was if the guys got fired every time they had a younger girl in the back, there wouldn't be much wrestling. I'll tell you that much. But
the ring rats.
Because his was a guy. And they automatically assumed, because he was open about his bisexuality amongst the boys, that he was fooling around with this dude. they immediately fired him, immediately, on the spot. There's no doubt about it. There's no way anyone, and, you know, you can sit there and say, once, you know, the gays come out and all they do is bitch and moan. You know, there's a chance I wasn't fired because I was gay. You know, maybe Vince never knew. I definitely felt I was treated by some of his management poorly because of that, and I know for a fact his management lied about me and things I said and did. Did that play into me being fired? There's definitely a chance. But there's no doubt in my mind that it'd be hard for anyone to argue about the Orlando Jordan situation if you know all the facts. It's almost impossible to argue.
Did you receive any positive feedback when you came out of the closet from your peers in the business, or maybe conversely, did you feel the wrath of some of the guys you thought you were friends with once it was made public that, you know, you were in fact gay?
You know what, I expected 50-50, you know, especially with, you know, I was online, people either tend to be a little more honest, or they tend to be a little more brutal, even if it goes against how they really feel. You know, they have the anonymity of being able to go on my MySpace and call me a faggot and queer, and there's going to be no repercussions. So I expected about 50%. I had 90 to 95, maybe even 98% positive. And I felt the same with all the guys I told in the business and just overall. But it wasn't 100%. There was a promotion here in Florida that I'm working for regularly, and as soon as that happened, you know, it definitely, they put me in a lower spot, and then before I knew it, they weren't booking me at all. And, you know, I heard the rumors that it was definitely because of that, but overall, I was able to get bookings easier than I was before I came out. And, you know, the fact that TNA wouldn't bring me back and Vince wouldn't bring me back, you know, who knows what that was all about.
What about your close friends? I know that you were, you know, in storyline and otherwise, you were close to Paige Falkenberg, Diamond Dallas Page, and James Mitchell helped you early on in your career. What is your relationship like with those two these days?
James is gay now. He's my lover. I'm just kidding. I'm sure he'd love it.
You should have seen the look on my producer's eyes. He's like, Scoop, yes!
No, I'm still, you know what? I haven't lost a single friend and not only in my professional life, but my personal life, through the coming out process. Not a single person reacted really badly, and you know, a few were thrown for a little bit, and, you know, but overall, they all came around. Anyone that did have any problem came around, but 95% right off the bat was positive, you know, and a lot of them kind of knew anyway and had a feeling, but, you know, I'm still, you know, close with Jim, close with DDP. I still talk to him. You know, I'm a bit of a recluse. When you're bipolar, you know, you end up spending a lot of time on your own. And
that's another subject, actually, Chris, that I wanted to touch base with, because you don't know this, but I was diagnosed with bipolar affective disorder when I was 19, just getting my career started, and it has been both a gift and a curse, believe it or not. In the last 5 years, thanks to medication, I've been able to maintain and actually flourish in my career. I mean, I've had most success I've ever had in the last 5 years, and I'm just wondering, though, when were you first diagnosed with manic depression, also known as bipolar affective disorder, and what kind of an effect has that had on your career? Because in doing a lot of research and having been in hospital and such, there are a lot of people in our field, like the creative field, that do suffer from it. There's, you know, the mania, if you will, that allows us to stay up all night and come up with all these great ideas and do all this work, and then the flip side, you know, the depression where, yeah, one does feel suicidal and one does feel like a recluse, and it can be very devastating on personal relationships, family, and otherwise. And I'm just wondering if you don't mind sharing with us a little bit of what it's been like, not only to be bipolar, but a bipolar homosexual. That's got to be, you know, twice the burden.
Well, yeah, and I think definitely one led to the other. You know, it's definitely a cyclical thing. It's chicken or the egg. You know, there's no way your mood and, you know, if you're up or down is not played into your sexuality, and, you know, if you're sexual and your sexual tendencies and stuff like that. So they definitely related. As far as time frame, September 14th of 2003 is when I tried to kill myself with an actual suicide attempt. I wasn't diagnosed until June of the following year of 2004. But, you know, I'm writing a book right now, signed a book deal after my first Stern appearance, and still working on that book, and it makes you re-examine your life. And as I'm going through these years, I'm getting interviewed, you know, at one point it was weekly and for 2 to 3, 4 hours a week. and it makes you revisit your life and your childhood, and you realize I probably had this my entire life. And there's no doubt about it, the way I came up with all those moves, the reason I was coined the innovative offense by Mike Tenay was that I was creative because of the bipolar.
Exactly.
Mania. I could not work out or tan or do anything in my daily life without the mind constantly racing about wrestling and new moves and picturing moves and my matches in my head. And the mind just, for people that aren't bipolar or haven't experienced anything close to mania or,
No, and that's really it. And I don't know what it was like for you, Chris, with your family, but, my parents being from Italy, old school, and just friends, they see you having a down day. Oh, don't worry, everybody's depressed. And, just go outside, get some fresh air, not realizing that it is the chemical imbalance that is not going away anytime soon. And then the flip side, they see you one day where you're the life of I've been always in TV and radio since I was 16, and I think that says enough right there. Being discovered at 16 had to do with my bipolar, because it was to the point where I'd literally freak people out at the just what I was doing. Like, everything was all hyper, and I knew so much and did so much, and then yet when you crash and you burn and you're there, looking at the ceiling, wondering, okay, is this the day you're going to try something? Then it's an incredible roller coaster ride, and even though Hollywood and society, the stigma's not as much as it once was, there's a great book that I think you should even check out if you haven't already done so, Chris, called The Unquiet Mind by Kay Redfield Jamison. She's a psychiatrist who actually was diagnosed with bipolar. It's an incredible read, and it really allowed me to become even more comfortable with my own diagnosis and be able to say what I'm doing right now, speak about it publicly, because in my industry as well, being a TV and radio announcer, everyone thinks, oh, that guy's got the perfect life. He's always on. He's always in that. And when they realize that, like everyone else, we all have our issues, I feel that I no longer think it's a burden. I carry it with a badge of honor. I know it's weird to say, but being bipolar is, if I can educate people and help people come to grips with whatever they might be going through, then God bless you with this book idea, and I hope it's nothing but a success for you.
Well, I'll tell you what, I'm the same way. I was shocked when I came out and first told people about my suicide attempt and my bipolar diagnosis, how much attention that got. That got as much attention, if not more, than when I came out of the closet. People were shocked that I was so willing to talk about it, and to me it wasn't. It's a disease.
Exactly. It's like, a diabetic needs insulin. We need our meds. It's always the same. Because we're not in a wheelchair, you don't have a bandage wrapped around your head. People are like, well, you look fine. What's wrong with you? Everything seems to be okay. I mean, you're a highly functional human being. So what?
Yeah. Most diseases, heart disease, liver disease, it's all one of the organs malfunctioning. The brain is the most complex of all the organs. It's the one that the scientists and the medical profession understands the least. And to think that's not going to have malfunctions and problems and chemical imbalances, and to try to explain to people what being up and being down when you're bipolar is like, in regular terms, it's fruitless. The only way to really understand it, I think, is if you had a really good, trip on mushrooms, or if you're taking cocaine. It's that kind of level of a high, and then the exact same as when you crash on coke or heroin or whatever kind of drugs, that type of crash where you just can't even get out of bed.
Yeah, it's an interesting way of describing it, because that's exactly what it is like. And I'm just wondering now, health-wise, how are you coping with your bipolar?
I've done really well. I was an inpatient last Christmas, New Year's, and my birthday, which would have been not the 2007-2008 holiday season, but 2006-2007. I was an inpatient for 14 days in a institute, and then I did 20 days in a halfway house. And ever since then, it's been now almost a year and a half, and no inpatient stays, no intensive outpatient. I still see my therapist every now and again, and they put me on. It's hit or miss with the medications. There's a lot of them that they try to use. I've been on most of them. They put me on lithium at that point.
Yep.
It's one of the older medications, but it's the one that worked the best for me, and it really stabilized me, and it got me refocused. And I am now in Florida, packing up all my stuff out of my condo in Clearwater. Actually, I have a place right across the lake, right across the inlet here from Hulkster. selling that place, and I'm moving out to L.A., hooked up with the stunt guy from Ready to Rumble, and I'm going to go out there and do some stunt work.
That's awesome. And Chris, that's funny you bring that up because you were heavily involved not only in Ready to Rumble, but the Jesse Ventura TV movie as well. Working with the actors and celebrities, I mean, you helped train David Arquette, Jay Leno. Were they all in it just for the bucks and the yucks, or did they show respect for your craft?
Arquette loved it. Arquette was, just a huge fan of the business. He was thrilled to be part of it. Leno, I think so, just as a promotion machine for his show. He's a workaholic. It was incredible how hard he worked. He was up and, from what I understand, over at his studio 8:00 in the morning every day, writing and filming bits and stuff. Filmed at 4:30, met us around 6, trained with us literally until we said, all right, that's enough for today. He'd go, I heard back to the studio till midnight, and then do it all over the next day. And he worked his ass off. I mean, he did, he did as much as we expected, if not maybe a little more. We knew we weren't going to get, a physical match out of him, but he gave it his all. And I think it was just a new experience for him. I think he had respect for some of what we did, and a lot of these guys grew up with people like Bruno Sammartino, and they have good memories of the olden days, and they just want to see if they can get involved. And I think that's why Hulk's new thing might it might be interesting. It'd be interesting to see who he signs and what exactly they do.
Yeah, you're talking about the Hulk Hogan celebrity wrestling vehicle that's going to be airing on CMT. When you look back at your career, 15 years long, and of course, you did make it, regardless of what other issues may have been at hand, politically speaking. As you know, the wrestling business is all about politics, but when it comes to talent, you were one of the best, whether it was Mortis, whether it was a member of the Triad. When you look back on your career, what was the most memorable times, whether angle, storyline, or whatever, and then when did you know that maybe this isn't what I want to do with the rest of my life? So let's start with the highs, if you will.
You know what? And that's the great thing about having to write a book. It's just so therapeutic. You forget so much, and it forces you to remember things. I definitely, the climb up the ladder was definitely better than once I got there. And, that was, again, a thing, Aerosmith does it best in the song Amazing, and they say, life's a journey, not a destination. I think in the beginning, the goal was so far out there, be a pro wrestler on TV, just to get on my first show, and then to get on my first TV and get on Smoky Mountain and see Jim Cornette run the show in the back and be part of that, and watch Paulie do his thing in ECW in the very beginning. I came in at a very good time. I was lucky enough to, the territories were still kind of holding on. Memphis was still holding on, and Smoky Mountain and ECW were, hot at the time. It was almost like the place to be, and I was lucky enough to be in those places at the right time and to watch things happen. And even getting from Memphis to WCW and I got there literally right as I got there. I started in May with them, and they went live with
Nitro and
Nitro
stuff.
in that September.
Hey,
so
Chris,
I was there at the very beginning.
Yeah, Chris, I don't mean to cut you off, but the time is our enemy right now. But I do want to invite you to come on back because we just really scratched the surface of your career. But I do appreciate you sharing so much personal information regarding not only your sexual orientation, but the bipolar affective disorder, because I think the more we can educate the people, especially in our roles, being profile people, I think the better it will be for all of us. And I wish you all the luck with your book, and definitely visit us again here on Fight Network Radio.
No problem. And here are my quick predictions on the MMA. I think Faber, Silver, Machida, Shirk, and Lesnar.
Wow, he's an MMA
right
fan.
Down the line there. Faber's no doubt.
Nicely done. I appreciate that. Thanks a lot, Chris. We will talk to you soon, my friend.
No problem.
All right.
And that's going to bring an end to the show. Both Wai and I would like to extend a thank you to Fight Network for allowing us to run that interview with Chris Kanyon. It was a very important interview to run, and I'm glad that all of you had a chance to hear it. We are going to be back later tonight. We are live at 12:15 a.m. Eastern with Rewind to SmackDown. That will be live and available for download after for all members of the Post Wrestling Cafe.